Are your PCB designs good enough to win an award? Hi there, I'm John McMillan and welcome to this edition of PCB Tech Talk, the podcast where we'll be talking about design tools, the EDA industry, and the questions that you're asking. I'll be bringing in special guests from time to time, including subject matter experts and EDA industry leaders. So be sure to subscribe to this podcast and let me know the topics you'd like to discuss and if you'd like to be my guest right here on PCB Tech Talk. Today, I have a special guest, David Wiens. David is a business development manager from Mentor Graphics' Board Systems Division, and we'll be talking about everything you need to know about participating in the yearly PCB design contest for Mentor Graphics tool users called the Technology Leadership Awards. Welcome, Dave. It's great to have you here on PCB Tech Talk.
Thanks for inviting me.
So you've been in the electronics design automation industry a while now, and before we get started talking about the TLA, tell us a little bit about yourself in the world of EDA.
Well, myself, I've been around EDA for over 30 years, a lifetime, so to speak, and I've been doing everything from software engineering, started on that side, writing router code back in the day.
Oh, great. So what do you do in your free time, I guess, like when you're not up to your eyeballs in this EDA stuff?
Oh, free time, I don't know. I like to do some hiking, a little bit of photography, a little bit of chasing a toddler around. It's all good fun.
Oh, that's great. So we're here to talk about TLA. So what can you tell us about the history and the significance of TLA PCB design contest? Is it in fact it's a yearly contest, right? So are there winners? Are there prizes?
Yeah, it's an annual competition. It's been around since late 80s. This is the 26th annual Technology Leadership Awards competition.
Wow.
So that makes it really the longest running competition of its kind. And we're proud of that. There are very few awards in the industry for the design community, and so we're proud to sponsor really the only one that's been around, like I said, for that long.
Wow, that's great. So what would you say the value to a designer is for entering the TLA?
Well, instant recognition, obviously, within their design team, within their company. We see a lot of accolades being issued within companies for that, but also within the larger design community. This is really a global competition, so they get recognition, individually and for their company, across the global design community. And of course, aside from that, they get a few bennies, things, the plaques featuring their designs, and also this year we're featuring. GoPro 3s for GoPro Hero 3s for the individual category winners and GoPro Hero 4s for the overall winners.
Great. So this is all about PCB designs. So are there minimal guidelines for design complexity? That is, what would you say to the PCB designer listening right now that believes that their design or designs may not be technologically complex enough to submit to the TLA?
I think it's easy to look at designs today and say, wow, the really complex ones, those are the ones with tens of thousands of nets, of components, of everything else, 30 layers and above, whatever. And certainly those designs do bring complexity. But sometimes the most complex design is the simplest. A design team that still is using through holes instead of HDI because of cost considerations really increases the routing challenges. Also, things like solving EMI requirements in a two-layer board. So these sorts of things where you might say, "Wow, that's a simple design. That's an easy design." When actually, it's really quite complex.
Right. So, tell us a little bit about the entry process. How would a PCB designer submit their PCB design?
Well, we've got a new system this year, and it's quite easy, really, to get your design in. You just start at the link that'll be available at the end of this podcast or nearby, and set up a profile, and you can actually enter multiple designs in the competition. It's an online form, and if you need assistance with the process, there's a link right there with an email, and you can fire off an email to a crew of us that are ready to assist you.
Can you give me like a short list of what kind of stuff you actually receive or kind of deliverables a person would submit?
Yeah, sure. There's a bunch of stats on design. Certainly, things like number of layers, number of components, number of nets, connections, vias, things like that. Basic stats that it's in your design. But really, beyond that, to make your entry stand out, the quality of your design is certainly, and the complexity of your design is certainly key. But really, in addition to that, the description of that design. What are the unique aspects of the design? What were the challenges that the team overcame during the design process? Those sorts of things really send the design past the others in the competition. So you can't really just upload a design and say, hey, it speaks for itself. Really, the judges, these are some sharp guys in the industry, but they really need to hear from you what kinds of problems you faced, how you overcame them, what you thought was significant in your design process.
Gotcha. So like a lot of companies, like particularly in the DoD, mil-aero space, they create some pretty complex designs, but due to whatever ITAR, whatever program classifications, I expect they may not be able to enter their designs. Is there a method, perhaps through some data neutralization techniques, that these folks and others, perhaps for competitive reasons, can use to ensure that their submissions doesn't compromise any of their corporate IP or other design restrictions?
Actually, it's the consumer folks more so than the mil-aero
Wow.
folks that tend to have IP concerns,
Gotcha.
and they're worried about their competitors out there.
Yeah.
IP security has been an increasing issue, and it's really the most common one that teams that start the process and say, hey, I can't finish. That's the most common reason is, hey, my boss told me I've got to bail because of IP. But really, when companies look at the data that's supplied, they can see that there's not a problem there. The data, you don't, the bill of materials of the components, that's not in there. Net names aren't in there.
Mm-hmm.
Constraints aren't in there. The things that really allow somebody to reverse engineer a design are not even in the entry. And of course, the design team controls, when they push the button to say submit, so they see exactly
Mm-hmm.
what goes into that entry. And again, when teams look at the IP that's supplied, they give it a pass, and we've even had IP lawyers look at it and give it a pass.
Wow, very good. So that's great news. So I've followed this for years, and I love seeing the entries and the winners, of course. What I'm really impressed about also is the judging panels that they put together for these. They're always really, pretty impressive group of folks. What can you tell us about the panel of industry judges for 2015?
Well, this year we've lined up another stellar crew of judges, and these guys, they've been around for a while, and so I asked them to tell me exactly how many years they'd been around, and the sum total, there's eight judges this year, and they amount to over 250 years in PCB design and over 350 in the wider electronics industry.
Oh my gosh.
So these guys have been around. They've done some serious design, and it's a lot of names you'd recognize. I can read them off real quick. There's Mike Creedon, Gary Ferrari, Rick Hartley, Steve Herbstman, Happy Holden, Andy Kowalewski, Pete Waddell, and Susie Webb. So those are all names. Anybody who goes to PCB West, that crew is responsible for probably about 60 to 70% of the technical sessions, the training sessions that occur at every PCB West. So they are some rather senior designers.
Yeah, that's a pretty impressive list you just gave there. It's very nice.
Yeah.
Can you give like an overview of the judging criteria for submissions?
Sure. It's certainly the complexity of the design fits in there, but it goes back to those unique aspects. What did you do, or how was it done? So it's both what is in the design and the how of it that gets the differentiation. And I'd advise teams to pay a lot of attention to their write-ups of the challenges. The typical engineering response is here's my design that speaks for itself. But
Right.
really, you've got to do some some time doing the write-ups, and we've tried to break it out into a bunch of questions, so it makes it a little bit easier to do. Yes, there are a lot of questions, but it doesn't require a lot of time per thing. So it's a combination of the quality and complexity of the design and the description of the design, coupled with the artwork. The judges do sit there and look at the design layer by layer, so they need something more than a JPEG, of every layer turned on in one shot, kind of thing.
Gotcha. What has been the trends over the past few years as far as how many submissions do you get? I mean, does it kind of grow from year to year, or is it more people getting involved?
It's been staying about the same. It's not the number of people. Again, we get a fair shot from pretty much every segment of the industry, every region of the industry. I took a look at the entries from this past year, and there were 43% came from Europe. PACRIM had 30%. North America 26%. Actually, that's a change. North America traditionally had the most, kind of equal with Europe, and PACRIM between India and China is really kicking in on the design side. So that's a push to all you designers in North America to get your entries in.
That's great. So I know it's great for the people who enter their designs and submissions. So what would you say, like, Mentor Graphics' biggest takeaway is with these yearly TLA contests?
Well, it really gives us a window into the design trends and the challenges the design teams are overcoming. Again, this is one of the few competitions out there, and therefore it's one of the few kind of surveys of that kind of data. Of course, it also gives us a lot of advocacy from our customers about what they've accomplished with our tools. So that's always cool. And really, of course, just it's a desire to reward that design community that really gets visibility. So it's kind of a combo of those three things. Just to come back real quick, John, to the design trends, because I threw out some numbers, but I didn't really give you some trends. Again, looking at some of the data over the last 5 years, while the board area has dropped 29%, that doesn't surprise really anybody. The densities have gone up by 25%, so
wow.
There's an indicator of complexities. Over 20 years, which is a lifetime for most in the design community at this point.
Yeah, right.
But the total areas are down 50%, and the leads per square inch are up over 600%.
Wow.
So areas down and density is just way up, and that's probably the biggest indicator of complexity that design teams are facing.
Wow, that's great. Can you give us like the TLA submission schedule, when to start submitting entries, when they're due by, the cutoff date? Can you give us that kind of information?
Sure. The entries start on September 14th, and they end on October 30th. So there's a good 6 or 7 week span in there to get things done. I'd encourage teams to start early. It is something that will take you, a little bit of time to gather the data and pull it together. It's not hard, but it takes a little bit of time, so don't wait until the last hour. And the awards are announced on January 5th. That's because it takes a bit of time for the judges to comb through all of the significant amount of data that's out there. So again, entries September 14th through October 30th, and awards on the 5th of January.
Oh, wow. That's great. That's pretty quickly.
Yep.
Great, Dave. Anything else you want to add about TLAs before we wrap this up?
No, I think that's good. Appreciate the opportunity to talk about it.
Sure. I'm glad to have you here. Well, it's been great, informative conversation on TLAs, and I understand you're off to PCB West soon, right?
Yep.
I'd love to have you back maybe and talk about your trip and give us an update on what you've seen at the 2015 PCB West conference. That'd be kind of fun.
Sure,
too.
Absolutely.
So, are you interested in seeing how your Mentor PCB designs stack up against the best in the industry? I encourage you to go to the link in the podcast show notes to enter your designs in the Mentor's 2015 Technology Leadership Awards. If you have any comments or questions on this podcast or any of the PCB Tech Talk podcasts, feel free to get in touch with me at the email address also provided in the podcast show notes. Thanks for listening, and be sure to subscribe and catch the next episode of PCB Tech Talk, now also available on iTunes. Thanks for listening.